I started probably 14 or 15 years ago thinking about it. I mean, I always knew that I wanted kids. I come from a very close family. I have 3 brothers. I have a magnificent parents, and my father particularly is wonderful. And it's interesting. I wanted to do it before it was even possible. And then when I started hearing about surrogacy, and I guess in the 90s when surrogacy just for straight couples began to be a thing, I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I could do that. But I didn't know how. And I think in the late, probably 1997, or somewhere around in there, 1997 or 8, I realized I didn't know anything, but Growing Generations was this brand new agency whose mission was to help gay men have children through surrogacy. And they were here in Los Angeles. I think they were the first of their kind in the world. And I went in and I met with them, and at the time they were, I think, switching from, they had started doing with gestational surrogacy, which was the original way, and then, with traditional surrogacy, and they were beginning to move toward gestational surrogacy. So I wanted to, and I was single at the time. And I wanted to, I thought, well, where am I going to get the eggs? You know, how do I do that? And I had a friend who I really, really loved and who I thought would be terrific, and she volunteered to be my egg donor. She was, I think, 35 at the time. And so, you know, I signed up with Growing Generations. I had my own egg donor. I was matched with a surrogate, and you know, we began the process. We were doing it in San Diego because at the time there weren't a lot of doctors in LA doing it. The one that they suggested was in San Diego. Another reason that I wanted to go with an agency was because, as opposed to when you guys did it, there was no do-it-yourself. There was just, you wouldn't have even known where to begin. And the idea of gay men having babies with surrogates was radical and you know, not even something that was out there. So and also I'm really not good with money. And I don't like thinking about money. I haven't balanced a checkbook since college. But I was making a lot of money at the time. I was writing for television. So I had been saving my money while other men had been buying, and women who I worked with were putting everything they had into tech stocks. And I've always thought I really came out ahead on that one.
Pre-2000?
Yeah, this was in the late 90s, yeah, right before. And so I had money set aside. And the thing that I liked about going with an agency was that they knew who the doctors were, I didn't. They knew who the surrogates were, I didn't. They knew who the egg donors were, I didn't. But the big thing for the money-phobic part of me was you would give them money and they would put it into a fund and they would administer all the money, they would hook you up with a lawyer, they sort of did all that for you. And because I had a very romantic idea about having babies, you know, to me it was a very spiritual thing, and I wanted this connection to my child. I didn't want to have to think about money, and I didn't want to be counting pennies and going, oh, you know, what, I didn't want to be having to think about it that way. So we ended up, we had 3 tries with my friend Lynn and our first surrogate, and none of them worked. And one of the things that you find if you do this is that no one can tell you why it didn't work. They can't tell you, was it the sperm? Was it the eggs? Were the cycles not exactly right? Was the lining of her uterus not exactly right? They'll never be able to tell you why. You know, we were left at the end of it. Both my surrogate said, you know, I'm wiped out. You know, I really wanted to help you do this. She's a wonderful woman. And I really wanted to help you do this, and but you know, my life is really complicated right now. She had 2 small children, and I just don't think I can put myself through that again with the shots and all of that, which I completely understood and respected. And our egg donor, you know, was like, I don't know if I can put myself through that again, and our doctor was saying you probably should go with a different donor. So we went back, and I was able, Growing Generations helped me find a new donor. And I always associate Heather with McFlurries, because the McFlurry had come out, and I took her from the airport. She and her husband, we went to a local McDonald's, and we had our first McFlurries, which I'm happy to say my children both love today. And it was a great match, If Heather and I had met on the street, we would have been friends. I mean, I don't know many men who have the relationship with a surrogate that we do. She's our daughter's godmother. And Elizabeth calls her Gami for godmommy. And she sends cards, you know, every birthday, every Groundhog Day, any kind of day there is, both kids get a card, even though our son, she didn't carry our son. And so anyway, so we had Heather lined up. She had a heart murmur history, so it took her a little bit longer to get her health insurance clearance. And in the meantime, I went back and I had to find a donor, an egg donor. So I found this woman who was recommended to me as, oh, she's like a young Martha Stewart. She's crafty. She's got these 2 beautiful daughters. Look at the daughters. And here I am for the first time looking through a loose leaf binder. It's like it really was a binder full of women. and you're like looking through this and going, what am I supposed to do? But I found this woman, and she it was a little Sears or Church directory photo of her and her husband and kids. And so anyway, and at the time it was very unusual to meet your donor. They were like, you want to meet her? And I'm like, I'm going to be having a baby with her. Yeah, I want to meet her. You know, my kids one day will ask about her. This is going to be their biological mother. I want to be able to say I've had dinner with her. I bought her dessert. So she came up from San Diego, and we had a dinner. We met at the thing, and she was in her little suit with the piping, and she looked very, you know, as advertised. So then we went through the process, and by the time we were going to do the retrieval, it was 3 months later, and the woman who I picked up at the airport wasn't the woman I met at the original interview. She was apparently she was now divorced and dating, and let me know on the ride from the airport, she's in her 30s, that she was dating this really hot 20-year-old Marine, and could I give her tips on how to give a great blowjob, because she was afraid she was going to lose him, you know, because he was shipping out. And I'm like, what the fuck? You know, what? You know, and she's like, well, you know how to do stuff like that. And I'm like,
well, that just tells me she's fun-loving and curious.
I'm like, you're asking me how to blow a Marine? I don't know. You know, but it devolved, you know, and then, so we went out to dinner, and she already was full of the hormones. We were going to do the transfer the next day, and then we went to dinner, and then we passed on the way back to the car, we passed a psychic. Can I go in to see the psychic? So we went into the psychic, and she wanted to know if the Marine was going to come back. Is he going to, you know, are we going to have a life together? And I'm like, I'm having a baby with you? You know, and then the next day we did the transfer, and then before she left, she goes, isn't this cool? I'm going to have my new boobs before you even find out if you're pregnant. And I'm like, what? And she said, that's what I'm spending the fee on. I'm getting new boobs. I mean, I've had 3 kids, you know, I mean, and sure enough, within 10 days, I get these glamour shots of her in a bustier with these, you know, and I'm like, you know, and then 2 days later, we find out we're pregnant. that was a miscarriage, and I think the baby just knew and said, I love you. So then we were, okay, and I met my husband 3 weeks before all this. And we met at church. I wasn't looking. It turned out the day we met, he was, huh? Wasn't a Marine? No, not a Marine. But anyway, I wasn't looking at all, but he mentioned that he loved kids, you know, and I thought, well, that's nice, you know, you don't meet many of those. But anyway, we definitely, the day we met, decided we wanted to go out. When I was traveling, and then when I got back, he was going to be traveling. So we said, well, could we go out? He's real, you know, calendar oriented, you know. So he said, could we go out when you get back? And I was like, sure, I'd love to do that. You know, what date would work for you? And I said, it would have to be a Monday or Tuesday. And he's like, okay, why Monday or Tuesday? And I just finally said, shit. Because I have an egg donor coming on Wednesday, we're making embryos on Thursday, we're implanting them in my surrogate on Friday, and then I have to do bed rest with her for the weekend, so it has to be Monday or Tuesday. And he was like, you're really serious about this, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah, bye. Nice, you know, nice meeting you. Now we've been married 14 years. But so then we, you know, so our fourth date actually was dinner with my surrogate. And she adored him, you know, I mean, on site, you know, and he walked out the door and shut the door, and she goes, he's a keeper. If you fuck this up, I'm keeping the baby. you don't get the baby, you know. So, you know, and that was the one that ended up in the miscarriage. And then we asked her if she'd take 6 months off. She'd be willing to do that before we tried again, because, you know, I just met this guy. I didn't know if he was going to work out. I didn't know. I definitely was having the kid, but I didn't know about him. And I said to her, you know, we just met, and 6 weeks after we met, there was a baby and a pregnancy, and would you mind if we take 6 months just to sort of figure out if he and I are going to go anywhere or be serious, and then try again? And she said, well, I really want to get pregnant again, but I really love him, and you're going to really screw up if you don't go with him. So yeah, you can have the 6 months. And then we ended up trying again. In the meantime, we found a new egg donor who is now the biological mother of both our children. And a year and a half after Kelly and I met, our daughter was born. That was 12 years ago. We had 16 embryos frozen left over. So when we were ready to have our second child, Kelly is adopted. So he said, you know, he never had any, he always imagined he would adopt. He said, I don't have a biological tie to any family members. So, you know, it's fine with me. Let's use yours. I don't need that. And, but we went through all 16 and nothing. So then we went back to the doctor, and we were like, well, what are we going to do now? If we can't get the same egg donor, which we didn't know if we could, there won't be a biological. Oh, and then we went back and they tested our sperm, and they said, you were lucky to get Elizabeth. You know, and I'm like, what? And because my sperm had tested fine 5 years before or whatever, but apparently it had degraded. And they're like, if you're going to do this again, you should go with Kelly, and which was thrilling to me. He had no interest in being a biological father, but you know, I mean, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could have a child that's yours. You know, we could raise a child that's yours and a child that's mine. And the romance of it didn't really click with him. It was the math. It was the symmetry. He goes, wait a minute, you'd be the father of one, I'd be the father of one of the same. Oh, that's so symmetrical. Yeah, let's do that. and that is indeed what we did. And our son is 7 now. And and we really wanted to have a relationship with. We wanted the kids to always know. Kelly said, you know, Kelly's the only adopted one in his family of four siblings. His other siblings are biological to their parents. They had thought his mother couldn't get pregnant again, and then so they adopted Kelly, and then they had 2 more. So, but he said, you know, from the time I was born, I always knew that I was adopted. It was just never a big deal. It was never a mystery, and I think we should do that with our children. They should always know how they got here. And luckily, we had a great relationship with both surrogates. It ended up being a different surrogate for our son, but the same egg donor. She's our son's godmother, and then the egg donor who we didn't expect to see again actually moved to town in 2008 with her husband, and now we babysit for each other. And we've been on vacations together. Her children are my children's half siblings, which they all know, and they adore each other. And when we met her, I asked, would you be willing to meet our children if they're like 18 or whatever and they want to meet you? This is the first time we met her, and she said, I don't know. She said, I don't know where, she was 20. She said, I don't know where I'll be in 18 years, but I probably would be open to that. And at the time, we didn't know her last name because you couldn't know their last names. But we were able to, we covertly exchanged emails when we did the second transfer, which we weren't supposed to do because I wasn't supposed to know her last name.
And how did that work out finally?
Well, it worked out, huh?
The relationship worked out well.
It worked out very well.
Not complicated. And
our daughter is thrilled. You know, she said, I can't imagine not knowing her. She's my biological mother. I would be very upset if I never had gotten to meet her.
Does she liken it to an adopted child? No, probably not. But with an adopted parent and a biological parent, or is it something different?
For her?
Yeah.
It's interesting. She is their biological parent, and we wondered. Our children have always called her Miss Andrea. She's Southern, I'm Southern, and that worked for her. And there was a period where we always wondered, and I think in your case too, I think most dads wonder, when is she going to ask, and yours is too young, but when are they going to say, where's my mom? When are they going to figure out, oh, all the other kids have a mom, why don't I have a mom? For us, it was later than we expected. It was in preschool. And it was when a lot of the kids that she was in preschool with, their mothers started coming to preschool pregnant with their next child. And it's like, oh, my baby, my baby brother's in there, my baby, and Elizabeth, who knew Heather, obviously we visited several times a year. She was like, well, shouldn't I live with Gami because she carried me in her tummy, and all the other kids lived with the woman who carried them in their tummy. And I was like, oh, geez, how are we going to answer that? And luckily, Kelly came to the rescue, and he said, I've never even met the woman who carried me in her tummy. My mommy is the woman who raised me, and we're not related at all. And she was like, you've never even met the woman who carried you in her tummy? And it was like, no, she goes, God, I'm so lucky that I know Gami, But that was kind of the end of the conversation.
Good spin.
It was the answer to her question, and it was the end. So it's the best decision I ever made. I knew it would be. It's been a million times better and more challenging, but the great outweighs the bad by far.
Great.
And they're fighting now. They're brother and sister. They fight more than they used to. But I've been home with them since the day they were born. And, it's weird. I'm like, I do the housewife role, I guess. But I've loved it. It's what I really, really always wanted, children. And to have this amazing gift of being able to raise them and to cuddle with them every night. We're big cuddlers. Kelly doesn't cuddle. I'm the dad who cuddles. Kelly has 9 pillows in a very specific arrangement that he needs, and then the other kids and I are on the other side of the bed,